The country kept getting richer. Your paycheck didn't. This is 50 years of American wages, Federal Reserve data, adjusted for inflation. And this gap, right here, has a name. Economists call it the Great Decoupling. We're going to show you exactly how it happened, how you got poorer. In the data. In 1973, the typical American worker earned the equivalent of about $30 an hour. Today, 53 years later, that same worker earns about $30 an hour. 53 years. The income didn't change. It didn't improve. The line went sideways. That's not a wage story. That's a purchasing power story. Meanwhile, the country got rich. Not a little richer. Trillions richer. Productivity exploded. Wealth poured into the economy on a scale never seen before in human history. From the late 1940s through the early 70s, the American economy ran on a simple promise. The richer the country got, the richer its workers got. Between 1948 and 1973, productivity, the value of what every American worker produced in an hour, climbed nearly 97%. Worker pay climbed 91. The numbers moved together. A gap of just 5 percentage points across 25 years. That meant something specific. One paycheck, one job, a house, a car, kids through college without a mountain of debt, the factory worker, the school teacher, the nurse, all building lives on what they earned by Friday. And then, in 1973, the correlation broke. The line that had been one line, productivity and pay rising together, split apart. Productivity kept climbing. Pay flattened, and it stayed flat. For half a century. By 2026, productivity is up about 75%. Worker pay? Up only about 12%. But the collapse didn't happen all at once. It unfolded across 50 years, in 3 phases, each one widening the gap further than the last. The wealth kept being created. It just stopped going to the people creating it. Since the 70s, labor's share of America's total income has fallen by about 5 percentage points. That sounds small. It isn't. It's a transfer of trillions of dollars, from paychecks to corporate profits and shareholder returns. Measured, documented, on file at the Federal Reserve. Phase 1. 17 years. The split started small. Inflation in the 70s was brutal. It peaked at 12.3% in 1974. For 36 straight months from 73 to 76, prices climbed faster than wages. Then again, from 78 to 82, 50 consecutive months of negative real wage growth. While workers fell behind, the structure quietly shifted. The top tax rate fell from 70% in 1981 to 28% by 1986. The federal minimum wage, in real terms, peaked in 1968 and never recovered, and the dollar itself was eroding. A dollar from 1970 is worth about 12 cents today. 88% of its buying power gone, making the same worker poorer by 88%. By 1990, the gap was real, but most Americans hadn't noticed yet. They felt it. They couldn't name it. If you want to see the rest of this data, and we're just getting started, make sure you're subscribed. Every number in this video is sourced. The next phase is where the gap stopped being subtle. Phase 2. 2 decades. This is when the gap stopped being subtle. Through the 90s and 2000s, productivity continued climbing. Real wages for the typical worker stayed flat. Wealth concentrated upward. The dot-com boom enriched investors. The crash of 2008 devastated middle-class wealth. In 1970, The richest 10% of American households earned about 7 times what the poorest 10% earned. By 2016, 12.5 times. The gap nearly doubled. The share of the country's income going to the top 1% more than doubled, from 9% to over 22%. And the wealth gap is sharper still. By 2016, the typical upper-income family held 7.5 times the wealth of a typical middle-income family, 75 times the wealth of a lower-income family, not 75% more, 75 times. By 2010, the lines weren't just split. The gap had become structural. Top earners had captured nearly all the productivity gains of 2 decades. Bargaining power eroded. Tax structure shifted. Wages stalled. None of it happened in a single year. All of it happened in plain sight. There's a name for what happened. Economists gave it a name. You've already seen why. Phase 3. 16 years. The acceleration. The federal minimum wage has been frozen at $7.25 an hour since 2009. 17 years. The longest freeze since the minimum wage was created in 1938. If the minimum wage had simply kept pace with productivity since the 70s, the way it used to, it would be over $18 an hour today. Maybe 24. Instead, $7.25. The floor didn't move, so the people standing on it stayed where they were and got poorer. And then came the inflation surge. Since 2021, rent up 27%. Groceries up 25%. Overall inflation up 23%. Wages trailed prices by 1.2 percentage points. Every American household is poorer in real terms than it was 4 years ago. To match the standard of living of a $100,000 salary in 2020, you now need $125,600. Not a raise, a break-even. And here's the mechanism. To earn that break-even raise, you also climb into a higher tax bracket. The federal tax owed jumps from $15,100 to $19,200, $4,100, just to stay where you were. That's why so many people who got a raise this year say their raise wasn't enough. 62% of US workers now say their pay isn't keeping up. 70% of baby boomers, 68% of Gen X, 58% of workers who got a raise this year say their raise wasn't enough. And the squeeze isn't loosening for the next generation. 22 to 27-year-olds in 2026 face an unemployment rate of 5.6%, above the national rate of 4.2%. Entry-level work is being automated. The first rung of the ladder is shrinking. Those already in the workforce? Stuck. In 2023, 26% of American workers found a better-paying job. By 2025, only 13%. Cut in half. Not because workers stopped trying, because the better-paying job isn't there. Pull back. Look at all of it together. For half a century, American workers became more productive every year. They built more, made more, generated more wealth than any workforce in human history. Productivity, up 75%. Worker pay, up 12%. Productivity grew 6 times faster than what the workers earned. Half a century of effort, on file. Between 1970 and 2016, nearly 1 in 10 American households left the middle class. The drift was downward. For every household that climbed up, almost 2 fell to the lower income bracket. The middle isn't holding. This is what the headline numbers call resilience. Low unemployment, steady jobs. The data underneath tells you why the country feels broke. You work harder than your parents did. You produce more than they did. And you take home less of what you produce than they did. An hour of your work today buys what an hour of your work bought in 1973. That is not opinion. That is 53 years of data. Finance told through data. Money by numbers. New data documentaries every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chart.